Welcome back to the deep dive. If you're here, you're ready to learn, and you might want to strap in for this one.
Yeah, this one's a big one.
Usually we take one topic, a specific tech trend, maybe a historical event, and we really drill down. Today we are trying to do something a little bit, well, insane.
I think that's the right word for it.
We are trying to map the entire trajectory of intelligence, where it comes from, how we're replicating it, how we pay for it, the rules we apply to it, and ultimately how we might survive long enough to see where it all goes.
It is a massive undertaking. I was looking at the stack of sources we've pulled, and
Mhm.
it feels less like a reading list and more like a blueprint for a whole new reality.
Exactly.
We aren't just connecting a few dots here. We're trying to draw the whole picture of existence.
It's intimidating, but, in the best way. Okay, so for you listening, here's the stack. We have lectures from the legendary Marvin Minsky, who is, he's basically the grandfather of artificial intelligence. We have a deep look at Tesla's Optimus robot, which is very quickly moving from science fiction to, oh, that's actually happening. We've got predictions from the futurist Ray Kurzweil, the ethics of philosopher Peter Singer, the economic history of Paul Samuelson, and even the cryonic aspirations of David Ettinger.
It's an eclectic mix, for sure, but there's a thread. There really is a thread that ties them all together. Think of it as our mission for this dive, to explore the entire spectrum of intelligence and existence.
Okay, lay it out for us.
So Minsky gives us the architecture, how our own minds work. Then Tesla and Kurzweil show us the vessel, how we're building new minds.
Right.
Singer comes in with the moral compass, how we should treat these other beings. Samuelson explains the engine, the economics that actually drives all this progress.
Yeah.
And Ettinger,
Ettinger offers the lifeboat.
he offers the lifeboat, exactly. How we might just preserve ourselves long enough to see this future.
The lifeboat. I love that. Because if this future is half as wild as Kurzweil predicts, we're all going to want a seat on that boat. We're going to touch on some incredible things today. A robot handling an egg with impossible delicacy. The idea of an ambulance to the future, why your emotions might just be subroutines, like in a computer program.
And the economic power of what Paul Samuelson calls lucky accidents.
So before we get to freezing our heads, we have to start with the basics. The source code. We have to talk about Marvin Minsky.
The society of mind.
Right. Now, I've always thought of my mind as, well, me, a singular thing. I'm the pilot sitting behind my eyes. But Minsky seems to think that's a total illusion.
That is the core provocation of his theory.
Yeah.
And it is a provocation. Minsky argues that there is no you. There is no single agent in your brain that is the boss.
Wow.
Instead, what you experience as consciousness is actually the result of millions of tiny, frankly mindless processes all interacting. He calls them agents.
That's a really hard pill to swallow. I make decisions. I feel like I'm in charge. If I'm just a bundle of mindless agents, who is deciding to record this right now?
Well, Minsky would say the decision is just the outcome of a massive negotiation between all these different agents.
A negotiation.
Yeah, think of it like an ant colony.
Yeah.
One ant isn't smart. One ant doesn't know how to build this giant complex mound.
Right. It's just following simple rules.
Exactly. But a million ants working together.
Yeah.
They display this incredible emergent intelligence. Minsky basically applies that model to the brain. And it's why he hated what he called suitcase words.
Suitcase words. Okay, I've never heard that before.
It's a great term. He meant words like consciousness or emotion or even thinking. He argued that these are just linguistic suitcases we pack everything into because we don't actually understand the mechanics inside.
So it's a black box?
It's a total black box. It's like pointing at a car and saying it moves because of its zoom ability.
Yeah.
That explains absolutely nothing. You have to pop the hood. You have to look at the pistons, the spark plugs, the transmission. Minsky wants to unpack that suitcase and look at the actual gears of the mind.
Okay, so let's pop the hood. One of the things that really struck me in his lectures was his take on emotion. We usually frame emotion as the enemy of logic, right? Stop being emotional, be rational. But Minsky says that's complete nonsense.
Completely. In his book, The Emotion Machine, he argues that emotions are actually just sophisticated software subroutines. They are different modes of thinking.
A mode of thinking. Can you give me an example of how that would work in practice?
Sure. Well, imagine you're working on a really difficult math problem. You're using your logic agents, your rational thinking parts. But you get stuck. You're just spinning your wheels.
Been there. Many times.
We all have. Your brain, Minsky says, detects this lack of progress. If you just kept using the same logic agents, you'd be stuck in a loop forever. So the brain triggers a switch. It changes the mode. You get frustrated.
And I usually quit or, throw the pencil across the room.
Right. But functionally, that frustration is a command. It's a high-level process that says, stop this. This approach isn't working. Try something else. Maybe it triggers an anger mode to force you to break down a barrier, or maybe a rest mode to consolidate what you've learned. Minsky's point is that we shouldn't view emotions as these mystical clouds that just fog our judgment. They're control mechanisms. They're designed to manage our mental resources.
So love, anger, jealousy, those are just resource management tools. That is incredibly unromantic.
It is, but it's also incredibly empowering. It means the mind is an engineerable thing. And this leads directly to his definition of what intelligence actually is.
It's not just about speed.
No, it's not just processing speed. He says it's resourcefulness. He uses this beautiful example of child, I think he calls her Julie, playing with wooden blocks.
I remember this from the source material. He breaks down that scene in a way I've never thought about. To me, it's just a kid stacking blocks. Simple.
But look closer. Minsky says Julie isn't just playing. She is running a massive multi-layered simulation in her head. She has a visual agent watching the blocks. What color are they? She has a tactile agent. How do they feel in her hand? She has a structural agent. Is this tower going to fall over? She even has a social agent. Is mommy watching me? Am I getting praised for this?
And if the tower falls?
And that's the key. If the tower falls, a dumb machine, a scripted robot gets an error message and stops. It fails. But Julie, she laughs. Or she decides to build a long road instead of a tall tower. She switches representations.
She doesn't get stuck.
She just gets stuck. Minsky says that true intelligence is having like 12 different ways to look at the same problem. If one view fails, you just switch to another.
Which brings us to his beef with modern AI. Minsky died in 2016, but even back then, he was really critical of where things were heading. He did not like the statistical approach, did he?
He called it a tar pit. And this is fascinating because the AI boom we are living through right now, ChatGPT, Midjourney, all of it, is entirely built on the statistical learning he criticized.
So what was his preferred way?
Minsky believed in what was called symbolic AI. He thought a machine needed to understand the meaning of a concept. It needs a model of the world. It needs to know that a box is a type of container, not just, a pattern of pixels that usually appears next to the word shipping.
He used that common sense example, which I thought was perfect. It's easy to teach a computer to do calculus, but it's incredibly hard to teach it that you can pull with a string, but you can't push with it.
That is the common sense problem in a nutshell.
Oh, there.
A statistical model, like a large language model, it knows that the words string and pull correlate very highly. It might even predict that push is a less likely verb to follow.
But it doesn't know why.
Does it understand the physics? Does it understand tension and compression? Minsky would say absolutely not. He argued that the field was abandoning the hard, necessary work of teaching machines to think in favor of the easier work of just teaching them to predict.
He had some really cool anecdotes about his own early work, though. The crayfish claw.
Oh, this is classic Minsky.
Yeah.
Pure engineer. He wanted to understand how a simple organism controls its movement. So he didn't just write code. He went and built a physical model of a crayfish claw using motors and switches and rubber bands.
He wanted to see it in the real world.
He wanted to see how simple, dumb signals on, off could combine to create complex, smooth, lifelike motion.
And the electric eel story. That one actually scared me a little bit.
It's a perfect example of nature's architecture, which was his whole point. Minsky explains that neurons, the cells in our brain, generally fire at a very low voltage less than a single volt.
Okay.
But in an electric eel, evolution has done something ingenious. It stacked thousands of these cells in a series, exactly like you'd stack batteries in a big flashlight.
So the voltage just adds up and up and up.
It stacks up to 300 or 400 volts, enough to knock a human unconscious in the water, maybe even drown them. And Minsky used that to illustrate his point. You don't need a superneuron to get incredible power. You just need a lot of weak, simple components arranged in a clever architecture.
And that's his view of the mind.
That's his view of the mind. We aren't smart because our neurons are magic. We are smart because of how they are stacked. We're a society.
Now, Minsky thought statistical AI was a dead end, a tar pit. But here is where we have to pivot to the reality on the ground. Because if Minsky looked at what Tesla is doing with the Optimus robot right now, I think he might have to reconsider.
He might. Or at least, he'd be shocked by the results. even if he disagreed with the method.
This is the transition from the blueprint to the actual vessel. We are building the body. And the progress on Tesla's Optimus robot is?
Well, it's defying a lot of skeptics.
It really is. I watched the footage of the Gen 2 bot, for you listening if you haven't seen it. In 2022, Tesla rolled out this rickety skeleton on a stand. It couldn't walk. It barely waved. It was honestly kind of a joke.
People laughed.
Yeah.
A lot of people in the field were very dismissive.
They were. But fast forward just 1 year, we see a sleek, finished-looking machine. It's walking smoothly. But the kicker, the thing that really made my jaw drop, was the egg video.
The egg video is something else.
Describe that, because it sounds so mundane, a robot holding an egg, but the engineering required to do that it's insane.
Okay, so the robot is standing at a table. It reaches into a bowl, and it picks up a raw egg with these metal tactile sensing fingers. First of all, it doesn't crush it.
Which is the first miracle.
Right. It lifts it, rotates its wrist smoothly, transfers the egg from its right hand to its left hand, and then gently places it into a pot of boiling water.
Now, why is that harder than, say, a robot doing a backflip? Because we've seen the Boston Dynamics robots doing parkour for years. That looks more impressive.
It looks more impressive, but this is a crucial distinction. The Boston Dynamics robots, at least historically, are often following a very strict script. They are executing a pre-planned trajectory. They know the geometry of the room down to the millimeter.
They're like a CNC machine, basically.
In a way, yes. Tesla's Optimus is different. It's running on neural networks.
Yeah.
The exact statistical learning Minsky was so wary of, it's not being programmed. It's watching video data of humans doing tasks and learning the concept of how to handle an object.
So nobody sat down and wrote a line of code that said, close fingers to 30% pressure to grip egg.
No. The neural net learned that to achieve the goal, move egg, it has to apply some pressure, but not too much. There's another moment in a clip where it's sorting blocks. It drops one by mistake.
Okay.
The block lands on its side. Now, a scripted robot would fail there. The program would break because the block isn't where it's supposed to be. But Optimus, it pauses. It looks down at the block. It adjusts its grip. It flips the block upright, and then it continues the task.
That's self-correction.
That is self-correction.
Yeah.
That is, well, Minsky might even have to call that resourcefulness. It's adapting.
So it's achieving the Minsky-like result, that adaptability, but it's using the statistical method he hated.
There's a real irony there. It's fascinating.
But let's talk about the implications of this. The source material goes into the economics of a humanoid robot. If this actually works at scale, I mean, this changes everything.
Changes labor, economics, society, everything. The estimates in the source suggest that these robots could be leased for around $40 a day.
$40 a day. So what's that? That's roughly $2.50 an hour?
$2.50 an hour. There is no human labor force in the entire developed world that can compete with that number.
And these robots don't sleep.
They don't get injured on the job. They don't unionize. They don't need lunch breaks or health care. If you can replace dangerous, repetitive, or just plain boring labor with a machine that costs less than a coffee per hour, the demand is effectively infinite.
The source mentions that if Tesla can deploy 100 million of these units, the company's valuation could exceed current global GDP.
It sounds like hyperbole. It really does. But when you actually sit down and do the math on the productivity gains, it starts to look plausible, frighteningly plausible.
And this connects directly to our next source, Ray Kurzweil. Because Kurzweil has been predicting this exact kind of exponential timeline for decades.
Kurzweil is the futurist. And his track record is, it's a little spooky, he claims an 86% accuracy rate on his predictions, going way back to the 80s.
What are some of the big hits? What's on his resume?
Well, he predicted the fall of the Soviet Union would happen because of new communication technologies, cell phones, faxes, that would break the state's monopoly on information.
Okay, that's a big one.
Huge. He predicted a computer would beat a world chess champion by 1998. Deep Blue beat Garry Kasparov in 1997.
Wow, 1 year off.
He predicted the explosion of the internet when it was still just a niche academic and military tool. So
yeah. Okay, so he's got street cred. He's not just, throwing darts at a board. What is he saying about right now and the near future?
Well, his timeline put the rise of autonomous cars around 2019. Now, we're a little behind on full level 5, go to sleep in the backseat autonomy, but with Tesla's autopilot and Waymo, he's broadly correct. The trend is there.
Yeah.
But the next few dates on his timeline are the ones that should really make you sit up straight.
2029.
2029. That is the year Kurzweil predicts that computers will achieve human-level intelligence.
Human level.
They will be able to pass a valid Turing test. They will be indistinguishable from us in conversation. They'll understand jokes. They'll get irony. They'll write poetry.
That is, what, 5 years from now? And looking at where GPT-4 and other models are, I am not betting against him. That feels achievable.
It feels shockingly close. Then he says the 2030s bring fully immersive virtual reality, not with clunky goggles, but by beaming signals directly into our nervous systems.
Yeah.
He talks about foglets.
Okay, foglet sounds like pure magic. What on earth is a foglet?
It's the idea of programmable matter. Billions of nanobots the size of dust motes that can rearrange themselves in the air to create physical objects on demand. You could say tea, Earl Grey, hot, and the foglets would assemble a teacup and the tea right in your hand.
That's Star Trek stuff. But the big one, the terminus of his timeline, is 2045. The singularity.
The singularity.
We hear that word thrown around a lot. What does it actually mean in this context?
The singularity is the point where artificial intelligence surpasses all of human intelligence combined, not just by a little bit, but by orders of magnitude. It's the moment when the machine we built starts designing the next machine, which is smarter, which then designs an even smarter machine.
And the curve goes vertical.
It goes vertical. Evolution gets decoupled from slow, messy biology. Kurzweil argues that past this point, the future becomes fundamentally unpredictable to us. It's like an event horizon in physics. We cannot know what happens next because we literally aren't smart enough to understand the entities that will be running the show.
But Kurzweil isn't a pessimist, right? He doesn't think this is Skynet and the Terminators coming for us.
No, not at all. He's a transhumanist. He believes we won't just be watching the AI from the sidelines, we will merge with it.
We'll become the AI.
We will become the superintelligence. We'll put nanobots in our bloodstreams to repair our cells and fight disease. We will connect our neocortex directly to the cloud, giving us access to all of human knowledge instantly.
So we have the blueprint of the line from Minsky, we have the robotic vessel from Tesla, and we have a timeline from Kurzweil that says we're about to merge with godlike machines. But this raises a massive and, frankly, very uncomfortable question.
The ethical question.
The ethical question. If we are creating things that can think and maybe feel, and if we are merging our own biology with them, how do we treat them? Where do we draw the line between a piece of equipment and a person?
This is where we crash headfirst into the world of ethics. And for that, we have to look at our next source, Peter Singer.
Peter Singer. The man who has probably started more arguments at dinner tables than anyone else alive. His whole framework is utilitarianism.
Right. And it's a very clean, I'd say a sharp knife of a philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
Utilitarianism, simply put, says that the right action is the one that maximizes happiness and minimizes suffering.
Okay, that sounds pretty good so far.
But here's the kicker. For all sentient beings.
That's the catch. All sentient beings, not just humans.
That's the part that gets him in trouble. Singer argues against what he calls speciesism. He says that discrimination based on species is just as arbitrary and morally wrong as discrimination based on race or gender.
So if a being can suffer.
If a being can suffer, if it can feel pain, if it has interests, it matters. Its suffering should be counted in our moral calculus. It doesn't matter if it has fur or scales or theoretically silicon chips. Pain is pain.
There's a story in the interview we reviewed about his conversion moment. He calls it the spaghetti incident. I think this really humanizes his logic. It's not just an abstract idea for him.
It's a great little scene. It's 1970. He's a graduate student at Oxford University. He goes to lunch with a fellow student, and before they eat, this guy starts poking around in the spaghetti sauce. He calls the waiter over and asks, "Excuse me, does this have meat in it?"
Right.
The waiter says, "Yes, it does," and the student just calmly pushes the plate away and orders a salad instead.
Now, normally you'd expect the guy to say something sentimental, like, oh, I just love cows, or meat grosses me out, something emotional.
Exactly. But Singer asks him why he doesn't eat meat. And the student doesn't talk about his feelings at all. He gives this calm, rational, philosophical argument. He says that animals suffer in the industrial production of meat, and he cannot ethically justify being complicit in that immense suffering just for the trivial pleasure of the taste.
And that blew Singer's mind.
It floored him. He had never met someone who treated their diet not as a preference, but as a moral imperative based on pure logic. He said it changed his life.
And he takes that logic and he expands it. He talks about the expanding circle of moral concern.
Right. It's a historical argument. He says, historically, humans only cared about their immediate family or tribe. Then the circle expanded to their city or their nation. Then their race. Then eventually to all humans.
So this is just the next logical step.
Singer says we have a moral duty to keep pushing that circle outwards. And he brings up these legal cases, habeas corpus petitions for chimpanzees and elephants.
I've heard about this. Lawyers arguing in court that a chimpanzee should be considered a person in the eyes of the law with a right to not be imprisoned.
And the argument is,
Mm.
it's logically powerful. The argument is that an adult chimpanzee has more cognitive complexity, more self-awareness, more memory, and more emotional depth than, say, a human infant or someone in a permanent vegetative state.
Oof.
So if we grant fundamental rights to the human infant based on its nature or its potential, logic dictates we must grant at least some of those rights to the chimp. He's saying you can't have it both ways just because you happen to be a member of the species Homo sapiens.
That makes people incredibly uncomfortable.
It fundamentally challenges human supremacy. Sear famously said, if slaughterhouses had glass walls, everyone would be vegetarian. He believes our morality is limited by our eyesight. We don't care about the suffering we can't see.
But his utilitarianism isn't just about animals. It's about how we spend our money, too. Effective altruism. This part of the source material was, frankly, it made me feel a bit guilty.
It's designed to. It's supposed to make you reevaluate things. He treats charity not as an emotional act, but as an investment portfolio.
An ROI on doing good.
A return on investment for altruism, yes. He is the example of a guide dog for a blind person in a developed country. A guide dog is a beautiful thing. It helps a blind person navigate the world. But it costs about $40,000 to train and deploy one dog.
Okay. A lot, but for a good cause.
But Singer points out, for that same $40,000, you could fund surgeries to cure blindness caused by trachoma for hundreds, maybe even thousands of people in the developing world. So the choice isn't help a blind person or don't. The choice is, do you help one person in America live a better life, or do you restore the sight of, say, 200 people in Africa?
When you put it that way, the math is just brutal. It feels cold.
It is cold. It's pure, hard logic. He says if you choose the dog, you are effectively saying that one American's comfort is worth more than 200 other people's eyesight. And that is the hard edge of utilitarianism. It demands that we maximize the good, even if it doesn't give us the warm, fuzzy feeling of seeing the cute dog helping the person down the street.
And he practices what he preaches. He puts his money where his mouth is.
He does. The source says he donates a third to a half of his total income. And he challenges the listener, you, to start with just 1% and then try to scale up from there.
No, we have to address the elephant in the room with Singer. He is controversial for a reason. His unwavering logic leads him to some very dark and difficult places, especially regarding the sanctity of human life.
And we have to report this neutrally, but yes, it's intense. Because his philosophy focuses entirely on suffering and quality of life, not on species or the idea of a soul, he argues that in cases of severe disability in newborns, where the life would be one of nothing but constant untreatable pain, euthanasia might be the most ethical and compassionate choice.
He specifically mentioned Down syndrome in the interview we reviewed, which is a lightning rod.
He did, and he was very clear about his personal feelings. He said that if he and his partner had a child with Down syndrome, he would choose to put that child up for adoption.
And his reasoning.
His reasoning was very personal. He said he, as an individual, values deep intellectual engagement, and he felt he couldn't have the specific kind of parent-child relationship he wanted in that scenario. But, and this is a key part that often gets left out, he immediately acknowledged that for many other people, raising such a child brings immense joy and fulfillment. He wasn't mandating a law. He was applying his own utilitarian calculus to his own hypothetical life.
It's a harsh rationality. It completely strips away the mystical or religious idea of the sacredness of life, and it replaces it with a spreadsheet of suffering versus happiness.
And that's why he founded the Journal of Controversial Ideas. He believes we absolutely must be able to discuss these dangerous thoughts openly. If we can't talk about bad ideas, he argues, we'll never be able to find the good ones.
Okay, so we've got the mind, the machine, and the moral crisis. But none of this happens in a vacuum. You can't build Optimus robots or fund thousands of trachoma surgeries without resources. You need an engine to power it all.
The economic engine. And this is where Paul Samuelson comes in.
Now, economics can be a bit dry for some people. But Samuelson is a fascinating character because he basically reinvented the entire field. Before him, economics was, well, it was literature.
It was philosophy.
Yeah.
It was people in tweed jackets writing these long narrative essays about market sentiments and animal spirits. Samuelson walked into that world and said, where is the math?
Right.
He brought in thermodynamics. He brought in calculus. He famously told his students the three most important things in economics were math, math.
So he viewed the economy as a machine that could be modeled and optimized, much like Minsky viewed the mind.
Exactly the same parallel. He wanted to understand the thermodynamics of money. How do resources flow from one area to another? How do we maximize the output of this system? Without the mathematical framework Samuelson built, we wouldn't have modern finance, and we certainly wouldn't have the capital allocation models that allow a company like Tesla to raise billions of dollars for a humanoid robot that doesn't even exist yet.
There is a great bit of history in the oral history we looked at about MIT. We think of MIT today as this ivory tower of high tech. But when Samuelson arrived in 1940, he called it Boston Tech.
Tech as hell, I think, was the phrase he used. It was a vocational school. It was an engineering school for guys who built bridges and roads, not for Nobel Prize-winning scientists who split atoms. But then World War II happened.
And the LyffeLab.
The radiation laboratory. It's a fascinating piece of history. While the Manhattan Project was off in the desert building the atomic bomb, the rad lab at MIT was developing radar. And you can make a strong argument that radar is what actually won the war on a day-to-day basis. It allowed the Allies to see in the dark.
And that just flooded the university with government money.
It changed everything overnight. The government suddenly realized that abstract science, physics, mathematics, engineering won wars. So they poured unprecedented funding into MIT. It transformed from a local engineering school into a global research powerhouse. And Samuelson was right there, watching this transformation happen in real time. He saw how crisis drives innovation.
He also talks a lot about lucky accidents. I love this theme because it connects back to evolution in a way. He says his whole career was just a series of lucky breaks.
He tells this amazing story he calls the bribe. He was a brilliant student at the University of Chicago, but he was so brilliant and also so embedded in that specific school of thought that the faculty felt he needed to get out and see the world. So they gave him a fellowship that had one condition. He had to leave. They literally paid him to go away.
And he ended up at Harvard and then MIT largely by accident after that.
Right. But there is a darker subtext to all this that he hints at. The 1930s and 40s, the elite academic world was still rife with institutional anti-Semitism. There were quota systems for Jewish students and faculty.
Right.
Samuelson suggests that the war and the urgency of the rad lab helped break those barriers down. When you desperately need to build a radar system to stop the Nazis from bombing London, you stop caring if your best physicist is Jewish. You just care if he's smart. The rad lab became a true meritocracy born of sheer necessity.
So the engine of progress isn't just about money. It's about the removal of those artificial barriers. It's about allowing the best minds, like a Minsky or a Kurzweil, to work on the hardest problems.
And Samuelson wrote the textbook, literally, on how to organize that economic engine.
Okay, we have covered a lot of ground. We understand the mind is a society of agents. We know the robots are coming to do the work. We know the ethics are going to get incredibly messy. And we know the economic engine is running hot. But there is one glaring problem with this glorious transhuman future.
The timeline.
The timeline, right. Kurzweil says the singularity is in 2045. I plan to be here, you plan to be here, but life is fragile. What if I get hit by a bus tomorrow? Or what if I get cancer in 2040? Just 5 years before the nanobots could have saved me.
You missed the boat. You're left standing on the dock, and you have to watch the ship of immortality sail away without you.
Unless
you
have a backup plan. And that brings us to our final, and maybe strangest, source. David Ettinger and the Cryonics Institute. This is what you call the ambulance to the future.
I love that phrasing because it's so precise. Ettinger is very clear. Cryonics is not about freezing the dead. It is about pausing the process of dying.
Okay, explain the difference. Because when I hear frozen, I think of a popsicle. And I know that if you freeze a strawberry and then you thaw it out, it turns into mush.
Exactly. Because of ice crystals. Ice crystals are sharp, and they expand, and they puncture all the cell walls. If you just froze a human body, you'd be destroying it at a microscopic level. It'd be useless.
So what do they do instead?
Cryonics uses a process called vitrification. After you're pronounced legally dead, they immediately work to pump out your blood and replace it with a medical-grade antifreeze, a cryoprotectant solution. Then they cool you down very carefully to negative 196 degrees Celsius.
So you don't actually freeze.
You vitrify. You turn into a glass-like solid. The molecules are all locked in place, but they haven't formed those destructive ice crystals. In theory, the biological structure is preserved perfectly.
And the logic is, I'm not actually dead, I'm just paused.
That's the core idea. Edinger argues that death is a process, not a single event. When your heart stops, you are legally dead. But your cells, your brain cells, are still alive for a time. If we can arrest that process of decay right at the beginning, we can wait. We wait for 50, 100, maybe 200 years until medical technology, the kind of stuff Kurzweil predicts, can cure whatever killed you and reverse the damage from the vitrification process itself.
It's a wager. It's Pascal's wager for atheists.
It is precisely that. Edinger is very pragmatic. He doesn't go around promising that it will definitely work. He just looks at the odds. If you are buried or cremated, your chance of revival is 0.00%. The math is very simple.
Can't argue with zero.
Right. If you're vitrified, a chance is unknown. Maybe it's 1%, maybe it's 50%, maybe it's 0.1%. But it is definitely mathematically greater than zero.
And for that chance, you pay a price.
But I was surprised reading the source. It's not a billionaire's game like most people think. No, the rumors of Walt Disney and other billionaires have skewed the public perception. Edinger says the one-time fee at his facility, the Cryonics Institute, is about $28,000.
$28,000. That is less than a mid-range sedan.
And most people don't even pay for it out of pocket. They pay for it with a life insurance policy.
Yeah.
You take out a policy, you name the institute as the beneficiary, and when you're declared dead, the insurance pays for your suspension. It's surprisingly accessible.
But there's a huge psychological hurdle. He talks about his own wife. She thought it was creepy. And I have to admit, the idea of my body sitting in a giant thermos of liquid nitrogen for a century, it gives me the creeps.
Edinger's retort to that is classic. He says, you know what is really creepy? Being eaten by worms, rotting in the ground, turning into dust and bone fragments. He argues that we have just normalized that horror because, for all of history, we felt helpless against it. Now that we have a potential technological fix, however slim the chance, refusing it is actually the weird choice.
It's also surprisingly sentimental for him. In the interview, it comes across that it's not just about living forever, it's about who you get to live with.
That part really touched me. His father, Robert Edinger, who wrote the book that basically started the entire cryonics movement back in the 60s, is vitrified at the facility. His mother is there, his grandmother is there, David plans to be there. For him, the future isn't just about flying cars and foglets, it's a family reunion.
But he does connect it back to the singularity. He says cryonics only really makes sense if you believe in the transhuman future that Kurzweil lays out.
Right. It's a critical point. If you wake up in the year 2100 and you're still an old, sick man in a world that's basically the same as today, what's the point? Cryonics is a bet. It relies on the idea that the future will have the vessel we talked about earlier, the nanobots, the new bodies, the ability to upload our minds. The lifeboat only works if there is a safe harbor to sail to.
So let's try to pull this all together. We've gone from the neurons in an electric eel to a robot boiling an egg, to the ethics of charity, to the mathematics of economics, all the way to a tank of liquid nitrogen in Michigan.
It's the full stack. Minsky provides the blueprint, the realization that we are complex machines made of simpler parts. Tesla and Kurzweil are building the vessel, the hardware that will eventually surpass our fragile biology. Singer offers the moral compass, the warning that with great intelligence comes great responsibility. Samuelson gives us the engine, the economic system that allocates resources to make this all happen. And Edinger, he gives us the lifeboat, the chance for some of us to survive the gap between now and then.
It's a really cohesive picture when you lay it out like that, but it leaves me with one final nagging thought, a question that kind of haunts me a bit after all this reading.
What's that?
We talked about Minsky saying there is no single self. We talked about Singer saying we have a moral obligation to delete suffering. We talked about Kurzweil's idea of uploading our minds.
Yeah, I see where you're going with this.
If I make it to 2045, and I successfully upload my Society of Mind into, say, an Optimus Gen 10 robot, and I have access to my own source code.
And you decide to do a little bit of editing, a little debugging.
Exactly. If I'm a good utilitarian, I should want to minimize suffering, starting with my own. So, do I delete the grief subroutine? Do I get rid of boredom? Do I delete the agent that causes heartbreak?
And if you do, if you delete all those painful, messy parts, are you still you? Or have you just cleaned up the code so much that the human part is gone?
That is the terrifying and exciting question. If we can finally engineer our own minds, what do we choose to become?
Maybe that's the ultimate freedom. Or maybe it's the ultimate trap.
Well, on that existential cliffhanger, I think we have to wrap it up. To you, the learner, thank you for taking this massive, massive dive with us. Whether you plan to be frozen, uploaded, or just stick around to see what happens, stay curious.
See you in the future.